Hello and welcome to this episode of Own the Journey, and we are here to take the wisdom from some great business leaders and share them with you so that you can move forward in your organization without having to deal with some of the same challenges that we've tried to overcome. We're excited to have David Ulloa with us today, who is a marketing expert, a videographer, an explorer, all kinds of wonderful things, and I can't wait to hear about being a shark whisperer. So at some point we'll have to get to that as well. Yeah. So David, thanks for being here.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Well, tell us a little bit of your story. I mean, you've obviously had an interesting background that has led you here. How'd you get there?
You know, I from the time I decided I needed to do something,
yes,
right? I've always looked at, because when you're a kid, you don't need to do anything except for that day-to-day, you know, your play, your this, your friends. But when I decided I needed to do something, I said, well, what would be the most fun thing to do? And I've always asked myself that no matter what job I'm going for, what project I'm about. And I said, well, what would be the most fun? That's how I got into nuclear power.
Wow.
I went to the Navy recruiter, and he said, well, you can do anything you want. I'm like, well, what's the best job? What's going to be the most fun thing I can do in the Navy for the Navy?
Right.
And they said nuclear power. I'm like, well, shit, I hope I can pass this exam. I mean, it is nuclear power. Yeah. And I did. But that's the way. That's how I get from leapfrogging from one thing to the next. Is I look at what do I enjoy, what do I want to do, and I make that the next phase of my life.
That's so cool. I love it. I mean, there's so many people who don't have that attitude in the world of what do I love, what do I want to do, how do I want to spend my life dollars in a way that's got a good return. I love it. Yeah.
It's tricky for a lot of people.
It is.
But first you have to, I think, maybe know a bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Before you ask yourself that question, and then decide, well, now that I know about myself and I love doing this, can I make money at it?
Right.
Can it satisfy the other things that I want in my life?
Right.
You know, like security, comfort, good beer, things like that.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
So, your primary business in today's world is videography. So,
film video production,
Yeah, and you're doing a lot of stuff underwater. Tell us about that. That's got to be pretty exciting, but pretty interesting in terms of the dynamics and the special equipment that you have to have. It's got to be unique.
It's absolutely unique. It's challenging. It is exciting. There are 1,000 barriers to entry.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and for me, the way that started was I moved from Austin, Texas to East Texas to be with my now ex-wife, her family.
Right.
And so she had ill parents and wanted, relocating closer. But I couldn't find work, the kind of work I wanted to do in this region. So I took up diving as a hobby. Yeah, and this was back in, I had already been diving, but back in 2004, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get serious about this. And so I went and became an instructor. I took every class I could. I was an instructor, I did this, I taught at LeTourneau University, teaching diving.
Yeah, master diver status.
Yeah, and just got in, thousands of dives doing, that. And I just didn't want to stop learning. So I got into technical diving, I got into cave diving, I got into wreck diving, deep diving, trimix diving. I mean, the whole thing, rebreather diving.
Wow.
Yeah, and I still loved my passion for the video camera, for telling stories was still there. And I'm seeing these amazing things underwater. So I'm like, well, I'm going to buy a housing. So I got a little housing, and then I got a bigger housing, and then I got a bigger camera, and then a bigger housing, and more lights, and now I've got a $20,000 rig that I'm running around with. Yeah. And so one day a guy comes to me, and we're on the same dive. We're going down to a shipwreck, 240 feet deep, out of Hatteras. So we're in the graveyard of the Atlantic. It was really cool. And he says, do you mind shooting video of me swimming through the torpedo hole in this shipwreck? I'm like, not a problem. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that, yeah. And so went and followed him around. I met a shark. So that's where the story of the shark whispering comes from. And I got a shot of him doing it. His company, and I think we can talk about this later, but his company took that bit of footage to Discovery Channel and said, we'd like to make a show They were pitching it.
Oh, wow.
And Discovery Channel saw the shot I got, and they said, I don't care what you do, but if you can keep doing that over again, you'll have a series.
Wow.
And so I got to host a series, which meant I got more equipment, more things to, you know, but the challenges involved in all of that, the technical diving, the wreck diving, being out on the graveyard of the Atlantic. I mean, one day it's glass ocean, and the next day you got 10-foot seas.
Oh,
and that can happen inside of a couple hours.
Absolutely.
You know. Yeah, you know the ocean.
Yeah, all too well. And the crazy thing, I mean, we think we have challenges when we've got a couple of cameras set up with lights in here, but you take that underwater, I mean, totally different. Different
environment. Yeah, absolutely different dynamic. The camera in the housing wet weighs, you know, 40, 50 pounds, and now you've got an anchor. So if this thing floods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and sometimes we tether it to ourselves so we don't lose it, because we don't plan on it flooding, right? The idea is it stays buoyant. But we have to make contingencies for things like that. Absolutely. Getting the camera in and out of the water. I had a fun time. I was shooting the USS Monitor. That's about 240 feet deep. We're in the same kind of area on the Outer Banks. And I have a great dive. I got some of the best footage I've ever got on the Monitor. And to get out of the water with all the tanks, equipment, gear, you know, that I'm diving with, and the entire dive is about 5 hours long.
Oh, wow.
With decompression.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so you hang your equipment on little lines below the boat. So before we dive, we set our line, and we throw it over, and they're just dangling. And so you go to your line, you clip off bailout bottles, oxygen bottles, decompression bottles, and a camera. All that's clipped off to the line onto the boat. Then I get to crawl to the ladder and get up with the least amount of weight on my body. And I still have the rebreather and stuff like that. And so I get up onto the ladder, and I get up onto the center thing, and I got about 8 people around me disrobing me, so getting me out of my gear. After a long dive like that, you don't want to work.
Yeah.
You want to just sit.
Exhausted.
Yeah, and it's not safe to work. You still have bubbles running through you. So the less you can do, the less strenuous activity, whether it's taking off a fin, the safer you're going to be. And so it's a team. Everybody's helping me out of my gear. And I can't see what the captain is doing, but he's pulling up the rope, and I can hear my tanks come. I go, there's another tank number 2. There's the oxygen tank. There's my deep, bailout tank. I can hear it. I can't see it. And then I hear, oh shit, and a big splash, kaboom.
Oh no.
Now Captain Artie is about 6'8", and he weighs about 370 pounds. He's a huge dude, and all he wears is a little tiny swimsuit. He's quite a sight to see.
I'm sure.
But he goes overboard. And I'm like, whoa, that's not good.
That's never good.
I know. And so I'm like, back on. I repower up the rebreather, fins back on, computers back on, mask on. I jump in the water. It took me about 10 seconds, right?
Wow.
It was fast. I jump in. The current is about 3 knots, and so we end up drifting. I go down about 50 feet, and I see Artie swimming, and he's making his way back to the surface. And so I grab him. We're on the surface. I fully inflate. We're about 300 feet behind the boat now. And it was just a quick, 3 knots. And I'm like, Artie, and he was like, I was this close. I was this close, and I'm like, this close to what? Dying? What'd you jump off the boat for? And he said, your camera. I was this close. He was trying to reach for it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, don't worry about it, And at this point, a tagline's coming at me.
Yeah.
They threw things over the side of the boat, and there's already one there. They just had to let the line out. So we got back onto the boat. But immediately, it's part of the logistics, and you're like, what are the challenges of having cameras?
Yeah.
So now I got to go get it, right? The next day, I can't go that day.
Yeah.
But triangulate 3-knot current, and I'm like, how fast was it descending, Artie? And he's about this. He just goes like this fast. And I'm like, 240 feet at that speed, and just a little bit of math that I'm supposed to have learned in high school gives me a target where I can drop tomorrow. And so we know where we're at because of GPS, and we just go to the spot, and I just drop a ball with weights on it, and I'm like, my camera ought to be somewhere around there.
Wow.
And it was.
And it was.
It was. Went back the next day.
That's a good story. Wow.
Yeah. Those are the challenges to that kind of thing, and that's how we got that footage. Actually, the NOAA reviewed the footage. It was all for them.
Yeah.
We've used it in other programs, but the idea was doing research for NOAA, and they saw the footage and like, this is the best footage we've ever had of the Monitor, including off of submarines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really good.
That's really amazing. Well, I think that's one of the gifts that I'd like to learn more about. I think that small business owners, organizations, whatever it may be, have a hard time telling their story through good video. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit how you walk an organization or a person through what it means to, like, hey, I've got this thing or I've got this company, and then turn it into a story that's engaging for people?
Mm-hmm. That's a tough thing for a lot of business owners, because nobody knows their business more than them,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And they know, just like me with diving or with cameras or whatever your industry is, you know every little part of it, and they're all very important.
Yeah.
You know, you can say, without this little piece right here, the rest of this doesn't work as well as it should.
Sure.
So it's all important. What we try to work with them to do, not try, we accomplish it. What we do is to help them distill it down to the main points. Because everything does have a story.
Yeah.
This is a great bar, and this beer has a story. This glass has a story.
Right.
And it could speak to something that creates or that shows the core values of that company. And so we look for those things, and we ask a lot of questions, like, what's your core values? What's your mission statement? Who's your favorite target audience? And always we get, everybody's our target audience. You know, like, no,
it's not.
It's not, yeah. And then, you know, and what's your values? You know, what's your top value? You know, what's the second one? What's the third one? What's the one you can't do without? We ask them questions around those lines, and then we pick and pull just those pieces that matter. Then we have to convince the people, the business owner, that all those other things, like this glass, very important to you, but it doesn't tell the story to your customer like it should. It's part of a piece that goes into a language that's deciphered by an audience on the end of a screen. And we've become accustomed to that story, and it's like a sign language. If we don't see the elements of the type of technical story we're looking for on screen, it's not going to speak to them. It'd be like some gibberish sign language, and won't make sense to the viewer.
Right.
And so distilling all of those things out that are important about the business, putting it in a format that people are accustomed to seeing on screen.
Wow. I love it.
That's what we do.
I think it's really good. And do you find that business owners, I know that the first times that I was ever in front of a camera, it was pretty, it was intimidating. I mean, that's the reality of it was. Do you find that a lot of business owners, when they're first, you know, stepping in and getting on video, they have imposter syndrome, they have a little inferiority complex, it's a little bit tough for them to get engaged in that?
Sure. Some do. If we meet somebody and we see that it's going to be a little tough for them, which is going to make it tough for us, we'll actually make it impossible for us to work for them. We overprice it. You know, we try to send that person to the competition. Unless they're really good friends or something like that. So if it's going to be really bad, you know, we've already figured what level we'll work with. If it's going to be above that, then we pass on it. But when we're at the level we can work with, which is, I think, sometimes high, you know, we work to get them through that through just basic confidence building exercises, but mostly rapport.
Just trust.
Trust. And I like to stand on the other end of the camera and be there, making direct eye contact, responding, nodding, smiling, laughing, whatever it takes.
So they're talking to a human, not to a camera.
Not to a camera.
That's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
And we have tools and devices where I can actually sit behind the camera, and through a reflective series of like two lenses, like a periscope, they can actually look at my face in the eyeball of the camera.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a fun little tool to work with. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, one of the big things that you've been involved with is Shipwrecks. Talk to us about that. I mean, like, that's so foreign to most people in terms of the equipment that you have to have, what it means to actually bring something up without tearing it apart. I'm sure there's a lot of dynamics with it. How did you get into that? I mean, beyond just diving, that's a whole nother thing. And then how do you actually facilitate it?
Wow. So getting into it was easy because I enjoy the ocean. I enjoy Navy. I enjoy boats. I also enjoy history because I believe history repeats itself. And we have our lessons to learn from our past, from our history. And it also tells the direction of our future. So, I mean, meaning in the simplest of form, if I know exactly where I've been, and I know the direction or the path I'm taking, I'm heading due north, and I was right over there a little while ago, and I can see that it's getting colder and colder and colder, I can predict that I'm going to need a jacket by the time I get to my destination. You know, so it's just future predicting by knowing your past. And so I love the past. The shipwrecks are a time capsule on the bottom of the ocean. Once they've been recovered and pulled to the surface and set up in a museum, they're polished, they're clean, they're different. It's not the same. But when you go underwater and you see a shipwreck and you go through a crewman's quarters and you see the crewman's gear laid out, or a mess,
Yeah.
You know, you go, wow, this is a pretty messy crew because I never let my place look like that.
Right.
Yeah. You can see that story. You get to a place like the galley, and there might be a pan still in the stove.
Mm-hmm. There's a unique story for everything.
Mm-hmm.
That really is so cool.
There really is. And bringing a lot of that up, and then we want to, and there's two things to think about when approaching a shipwreck. One, it's a grave. And half
honor what it is.
Yeah, and a lot of these military wrecks are actually off limits. You can't go collect things from there. These are service men and women. And the stories are incredible. The series I got to host was Quest for Sunken Warships. And so we did just that. We went into and told the stories of these sunken ships and the sailors that went down with them. And in some cases we go down and there's entire human remains piled up in a corner. And you could tell that there was an explosion that pushed this body into that edge, or maybe the explosion of water as the ship was sinking.
Right.
In one case, I don't know if this would have been air and water moving or an explosion. On a Japanese ship, the sailor's head got lodged into the ventilation. So his head, maybe he was looking for air, and he was just shoving his head through there to try to get air, I don't know, or it just got lodged, but the skull is still sitting in the ventilation tube, and his bones are right below him. Wow. Weird stuff, yeah. So to bring any of that up, not on the shipwrecks, but on, you know, a freighter that goes down in a storm, and, you know, or something like that, it's a little tricky. Especially on the deep wrecks, because you have the decompression, and you have to, in the places where there are shipwrecks, the water is usually pretty turbulent, either on the surface, or there's strong midwater currents, strong topwater currents, and so by the time you get into the current, things are just flapping around. You know, 3 or 4 knot current doesn't seem like a lot until you're trying to stay steady, and all your gear is just constantly shaking and beating, and you are. I've got some great video of anchor lines. So the boat is being held to the surface, we're tied to the anchor line, and the current, there's 5 of us, and the current is so strong pulling on us, we're actually bending the anchor line where we're at.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like we're pulling this whole thing. It just becomes this weird rope that we're pulling. I mean, it's a big rope, and we're changing the shape of it just by holding on to it in the current. And we actually tied to it, because it'd be impossible to hang on through all that for hours. So we tie ourselves to it. But you know, anything that comes up has to survive that trip, and then it's got to survive, depending on how long it's been underwater, the desalination process. So lots of things that are wood or soft or even ceramic, like plates and things like that, not so much glass, but have absorbed salt water, and we have to desalinate it. And old wreck divers from New Jersey taught me this. Just put it in your toilet bowl, not the, you know, the big,
the backside.
The backside, not where your business is going. But you put it in there, and it constantly gets fresh water. So the salt will leach out of it. You flush, and it goes down, and then it fills with fresh water. You leave it in there for a year, and then you can put it up on your display case.
Wow.
Simple process, So there is a process to bring things up, and then the technical nature of getting it is, you know, overcoming a lot of the elements, and that's all on top of the diving.
You actually go out and raise money to bring up some wrecks, right? I mean, so it's a whole process to go through, and I'm sure it's quite complicated, and the rights to it and all of those kind of things. So
no, we're not in that business. I've been around it. The wrecks we recover are we're contracted to go get them.
Oh, so they've already taken care of that.
Yeah,
you're helping to lead the charge.
Yeah, they contract us to get the wreck, and we just started this division of a company. So we're rebranding from Vallejo Films to Alpha X Group. Okay, and within that, one of the verticals, one of our business verticals, is Alpha X Subsea Search and Recovery. And so airplane goes down, you know, and they want something recovered out of it, we'll go get it. Right. Or they just want to find the plane for insurance purposes to see, you know, if it was an engine failure, if it was this. And we're talking thousands of feet deep. And so we're sending ROVs, not necessarily diving. Yeah. But we'll do those, but it's a contract. It's contract work.
I understand. So what's your deepest dive?
495.
490. Oh,
in a cave.
In a cave. In a cave. Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Ocean is 360.
Wow. I can't even imagine. I really can't. I'm a very novice diver, and so I can't imagine being that deep.
It's there's not much of a difference on your body, or I mean, things shrink. Like I've got this nice watch, and it's not snug on me, but you know, at 500 feet, this thing would do just loops around me. The entire body gets compressed. Yeah. And so all of our gear has stretchy things, you know, on our wrists and wherever, you know, back of the head. And there's nothing solid like this piece of plastic can survive that. But recreational diving, not a problem. You can take this, you know, on recreational dives. But other than things like that, it really is the same. There's just some rules to live to survive the trip up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you talked about the Discovery Channel and some of those kind of things. So what's it been like to work with a big organization like that? You know, coming from a guy who's traveled and done all those things, and all of a sudden you're on, or get the chance to work with Discovery. It's got to be awesome.
When I got the news, when I got the phone call from this guy, Dan, Dan Crowell. He's a good friend. He's the guy who asked me to video him going through the shipwreck. When I got the call, I'm standing up behind, I'm on my back of my chair. I like to stand up on phone calls. So I'm standing up leaning against the chair, and I remember doing a happy dance. I was like, ah, you know, got the project. And I didn't even, I mean, I knew they were pitching it to the network, and I'd been involved in television production and motion pictures for 10 years before that. But to get the call to say they want you to co-host it with me, that's what he said, I want you to co-host it with me. Wow. And we'll get guest hosts, and and I'm like, wow, this is fun. So that's the initial reaction. But you know, once you've got that reaction and you're happy and you're like, okay, now it's work. Yeah. Now it's business.
You got to get down to it.
Yeah, and you know, it's a large corporation. I mean, they are massive. And when you have a project, you have an executive producer who's in charge of 10 series or something like that. Okay. And then you have, that's a senior executive producer. And then you've got other, maybe 2 or 3 executive producers or executives. And then you've got some producers, and then you've got some line producers, and you've got some showrunners, and then you've got directors, and you got, you're working for a dozen people, even as the host, or if you're trying to pitch something. I mean, there's always a dozen people above you that each have an opinion on how the program grows. And even when it's your own lines, you're like, well, this is what I'm saying, this is what I want to say. And we get the scripts back, and you know, this is the outline, this is what we'd like you to say. We change it, and then it has to go all the way up and all the way back down. Oh my gosh. It's work. It is work.
It is work.
Yeah. And then there's the edit. And then, so the edit has to be approved, and then they give the edit to us, and we look at it, and we go, yeah, edit sounds good, except that isn't right. You know, we factually correct it and things like that. So working for the network is not unlike working for a large corporation. One of our clients was Honeywell. Oh, yeah. And every time we had a meeting for an edit, I had 10 people on the call. And I'm just leading a call in the C-suite at Honeywell. You know, it was all virtual, so it was easy. But
everybody had an opinion. Everybody had a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was fun. And I come out I come in as a creative. I understand them in a world of people who are wearing their ties and all that. But one day on the Honeywell shoot, we had just finished a cut, and I sent it to him, and I told this is one of the vice presidents at Honeywell. I said, "Ma'am, you're gonna love this." And she's like, and the whole meeting got quiet. Usually when I leave a statement like that, people would say something, and I'm like, whoa, the room just got quiet. It was on the phone. And then I said, wait a minute, I'm gonna have to mute out. And they said, why? And I said, because there's a train coming. And they said, where are you? And I said, I'm on the side of a lake. We just finished a shoot with some boats, and so I'm sitting on a picnic table. I got a 200-acre pond in front of me with lily pads and birds and all, and I'm talking to people in a boardroom, you know, in their little cubicles and stuff, but that it just showed the difference of you know what it was. And later I found out, when I told her, you're gonna love it, she hates it when people say that to her. So her staff was immediately like, this guy's done. Yeah, he's over. He's never gonna see David again. Yeah. But I did such a good job building rapport early on that I had freedom to be able to, you know, my passion was coming out, and I was able to say things like that to her. Yeah. And she said, okay, when I told her, you're gonna love this. And she did love it. Yeah. She loved it a lot. She took it to the president of Honeywell, and it was a part of a presentation. Wow. Yeah, it was a big deal. But it was the passion. And working for Honeywell is the same as working for Discovery or Nat Geo or BBC. They all come through. There's a lot of people you're going to be surrounded with. There's a hierarchy, there's a structure, there's a culture already in place. And as an outsider, a contractor, I have to figure out the best way to blend in and mix with that culture.
Wow.
That's the hard part.
That's a hard, really, really tough thing. So what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to go down that path? What skills do they need? What do they need to be prepared for?
A lot of rejection.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to take rejection. I had a great friend when I was a kid, 18. You know, we'd go to the bars, and he would just go to every girl, like in the bar. I was like, you want to drinks, and he'd have shirts out in the car. He'd come back, and you want like, it would go around the bar. He'd get a million rejections. And then 5 minutes later, he's leaving. He's like, I'll be back. Jeez, you know, crude, but I mean, that's how you have to be when you want to approach a network with your idea, with your project, or a production company. Yeah. I get 20 scripts a year. Or stories, you know, ideas. Like, I've got this idea, and then they want me to pay for it. Right. I'm like, nope, sorry, we're not doing any of that. Yeah. But so we hand out a lot of rejections, and I try to be compassionate about it. And I read what their material is, and I usually give them a few notes and say, well, you could improve it by this. We can't do it for you, but you know, hopefully you can find a company that looks for X, Y, and Z, and maybe that'll narrow your search.
That's awesome.
So a lot of rejections is one of the keys, but then also be super passionate about your story, your concept, your idea, whatever it is. I think to somebody starting out, if you're just like, oh, this is a good vehicle, I think I can make it work, it's not enough. No. You're gonna have to be like, I love this idea, there's nothing better.
Yeah, you're gonna change the world.
Gonna change the world.
That's it.
That's it. And then you walk in and you tell somebody, we are gonna change the world together, Mr. Discovery Channel executive, you know, and you're gonna like it, and you're gonna get a promotion, but you know, whatever it is they're looking for. Right. Understand, and that's probably number 3, is understand what your customer is looking for, or whoever you're pitching to.
Kind of the with them, what's in it for me, on their behalf.
On their behalf, because they have, you know, all the way from their boss, or you know, the CEO and the president, they're told, this is how we're going to expand the network, this is the people we're marketing to this year, and so the type of shows we're looking for need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And you're sitting out here and you don't know that, because that's their secret meeting. Right. they're just out putting their feelers out to, you know, looking for the X, Y, and Z type shows. And
you may or may not check that box.
Not unless you get a rapport or you know, some inside information. I scour the articles I can find about any of the executives, because they'll leak what they're looking for. Yeah. You know, or you can start to see the pattern of the shows they're picking up. You know, because there's announcements in the Hollywood Reporter, different rags like that will put things out and say, oh, Discovery just acquired rights to, you know, or Nat Geo is looking to see, you know, they're going to launch this next year. Netflix is going this way, and so it's like, oh, well, this is the pattern. Let's see if what I have over here in my story bag will fit that pattern.
But so staying plugged in, ear to the ground, paying attention to what's going on, so that you can pick up what they're looking for. That's awesome. Yeah, good deal. So we got to dive into the shark whisperer thing. So tell us the story first. How did that come along? And then I want to hear like your favorite story or stories, and then maybe a scary story along with it.
Sure. That shipwreck that I'm filming Dan on, a shark comes around, and I was able to speak to it. Now, if somebody goes, well, how do you speak to a shark? Well, it's the same way you might speak to your dog, or a horse, or a cat, or something. You know, a lot of people have cats and dogs, and you can train your cat or dog to do any number of things. Sure. Most households have about 5 things that they've taught their cat, dog, or whatever. Some are more, and some are very complex, and some are pretty simple. I learned a version of natural horsemanship that taught me how to use energy, intention, focus, positive and negative conditioning, classical conditioning, to get my horse to do just about anything. But mostly what I want my horse is to be super sensitive to my desires. So if I want it to back up a little bit, I can just focus right on my horse and just put some energy and, you know, get bigger, and the horse will be like, oh, you just need me to back up. Humans are super sensitive to this, and there's a funny trick. Can you flare your nostrils? Yeah. Find a crowded aisle in a grocery store where everybody's doing their thing. Flare your nostrils and walk straight with intention, like you're getting to the other side and no one's stopping you. The seas will part.
People can just get out of your way.
Your nostrils are flared, and we flare our nostrils when we're ready to fight.
And so people pick up on it.
They pick up on it, even at their peripheral, and they're like, get out of his way.
Yeah.
Get out of his way. Now, you're going to marching through. I mean, you always, there's some speed and
body language and other things, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I do the same thing with horses. I don't flare my nostrils. They don't know that. Or with sharks. They can't see me because I got a mask on. Yeah. And so, but you can use energy and intention, and I can tell the animal, I'm looking at your leg. I'm looking at, and if I sat here and looked at your leg long enough, you're like, what do you want me to do with my leg? Stop it. Yeah. And I did that with the shark.
Wow.
And I pushed energy in this area, like boom. It was swimming beside me, and it was about to swim in front of the lens. And a big 15-foot shark, little Dan, but he's that big, and by the time he gets covered over by the shark, the shot's over and we don't get it.
Right.
So I put energy in this kind of forward zone, so it's swimming, and it caused it to bend away.
Wow.
And then it swam around me in a circle and parked over on the other side of me. And I swear it said, did you just talk to me? And I'm like, did you just hear me? And we swam together, interacting with each other for the rest of the dive. It was another 10 minutes while I was shooting more video and stuff like that. After that, it was very cool. After that, I thought, wow, I need to learn more about communicating with sharks the same way I'm doing with my horses, because I'm pretty good with a horse and a dog. And so I started going out playing with sharks. And the more I played with them, the more I realized they're smart, they're intelligent, they have personalities, they have likes, dislikes, they have, like, don't touch me there, don't do this, kind of opinions about what you're doing, and they're playful. You get around a bunch of, especially younger juvenile sharks, they want to come and bump you and rub on you and scratch on you. They're still growing, and so they're like touching everything and stirring up the sand, and it's like, stop, I'm trying to get a picture here. You can send them away. Yeah. But that's what attracted me to it. And the more people that watched me play, because I'd go on a dive and there are 20 other people or whatever diving, and I'd be over here playing with sharks. And
they're all freaking out probably.
A little bit, yeah. And then, we'd get back to the surface, and I'm usually the first one in, the last one. First one off the boat and the last one back on the boat. I'm always that way. And by the time I got on the boat, they've either already talked to my girlfriend or talked to the boat captain, and they're like, what is he, some kind of shark whisperer or something? And that the name kind of stuck. It's from seeing that. It's just awesome. People call me that. And I'm more of a shark observer, and I observe behavior, and I love to play with them. I love to play with people, that kind of, that's awesome. How that started.
So tell us a good story about that. I mean, there's had to be some kind of crazy times at some point when you were doing that.
There's some crazy times, but it's mostly learning activities or exercises. So one time I get a phone call. Here was the crazy part, is I get the phone call. Somebody says, I got a problem with a shark. And I'm like, well, what's your problem? And like, I can't get the shark to eat. Can you help me? And I'm like, well, what's it eating? It obviously has to eat. And she said, well, it's eating the other sharks in the aquarium, in the pool. It was a big 40-acre recovery pool pond where one of the university does research on sharks that have been captured in the wild, and you can't return them once you've captured them here in Florida. Fish and Game says, nope, once you've caught them on a line, they cannot go back to the wild.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's just a ridiculous rule, but then what do you do with it? You can't eat it. It's against the law to kill it, too. And so there are places, and this was one of them, where you can deposit them and they become specimens of science. Not cruel like they do to monkeys or whatever, but, it's like mostly with shark repellents. And different things like that, what kind of foods and mating behaviors. It's very hard to see sharks mate in the wild. Oh, sure. So when you get them in these tanks, scientists can observe them, and they mostly just live. They're not like lab rats. They mostly just living. Anyway, the shark was eating the other sharks, and it wouldn't eat from the humans. The humans are showing up with dead fish. Well, that's how it got a hook in its mouth, is eating dead fish. And it was like, I ain't touching that again. Yeah, last time sucked. You caught me in the gills, you ripped me out. And then they needed a veterinarian, so a veterinarian worked on this shark for about 3 weeks to sew its gills back up. Oh, wow. Yeah, and so now the shark is traumatized. Well, I spent 2 days with the shark underwater. Most of it I couldn't see the shark. It was out of sight. It was away from me. But I would just sit on the bottom of the tank, and when I knew it came by, I would play, and I would pretend not to see it and let it sneak up on me. And at one time and I did other exercises where I flooded the pool with sensation. So I got about 15 people to swim with me. And so we're all swimming across the 40 acres. It was a pretty good swim. Yeah. We're swimming across it, and the idea, push the shark over to a corner, just to show it that we can move it. It might have to mind us if we ask it to move, because I wanted to be able to draw it.
Okay.
So you have to, it's a balance with, if you're going to ask to draw something, you maybe push it around a little bit.
Okay.
Super, super basic, but you know, it's a balance. It's creating balance. So anyway, I was able to draw it back, and the breakthrough moment for the shark is it came and it swam and it looked at me and it was just going around. I'm pretending to ignore it. And so my fins are sitting straight up on the bottom. I'm literally sitting on the bottom, listening to an MP3 actually, but an underwater one. And the shark came by and just touched my fin tips, just touched them with its pectoral fin. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. I guess we're done. And so I got out. And they're like, what happened? I'm like, shark just touched me. I think we're good. I think it just made peace with a human and realized it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so the next day I showed up, it literally, when my truck drove into, big diesel truck, so it could hear the vibration, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it swam right up to me. And it showed me its scar. I could see the scar. I've got a nice video of it, and you know, just swam by. And so then I got some dead chum and just held it in the water, and it came to eat. And then we taught it. I taught it how to come to a feeding area. So I taught the owners how to bang on a pipe. I mean, just bang on the pipe 3 times and feed. And now all you have to do is bang on the pipe 3 times, and if it's 40 acres,
it'll come in.
Yeah, and they learn it the first time.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's to me that was an exciting story. Not scary, but on the other hand, it was dark water, couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
I mean, murky water, could only see a few feet.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
That was fun. So it was learning. I got to learn some things. And then another time, I'm in the Bahamas, and with 40 sharks swimming around me, most of them female, some of them had just mated. And mating is very violent. So for the male shark bites down on the pectoral fin of the female shark and then throws her down onto the reef and then inseminates her.
Wow.
It's not like a penis, but it just inseminates. It passes semen into her glands, and then a baby comes out later. But it's violent for the female. She's just beat to heck and bite marks all over her. And when sharks pass you, they do like to touch. They just like to touch. And so I was doing the same thing, touching them back as I'm swimming. I don't swim with my hands, so I'm paddling with my feet, and my hands just sit beside me or like this. And when some animal comes by, I'll touch it. I'll just become with it. Well, I touched one that had just mated. And she was right here, so I touched her pectoral fin, and it was painful. And her face, I mean, her head about this big.
Wow.
And she goes, like, don't do that. Yeah, you're not mating me. I just had that happen, and it wasn't so much fun. And so I felt really bad, and I'm like, sorry, madam, I didn't mean to hurt you. You know, and I could touch her someplace else, and she was okay with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
respecting the animal.
Yeah, that was a little scary when you see a big right in front of you.
A whole lot scary, I'm sure. Yeah, very cool. Well, David, I want to say thank you very much for taking some time and coming in and hanging out with us and sharing some amazing stuff. I just can't even believe what it would be like to be in those circumstances, but you've pulled it off. So here's to you. Cheers.
Cheers.
And thanks to you for owning your journey.
And your journey too. Thank you.
Thank you.